Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2020 Teacher Leader Summit virtual series. I am your host moderator today, Leslie, and I will be, if you have any questions, you can contact me. We ask that participants keep microphones and videos off for the remainder of the session unless specifically asked to turn them on from a presenter. You are attending L084, and I will let me introduce your presenters today. Holly Jesse and Serena White, Dina Zoli, Erica Kelly, Rochelle Williams, Tony Vroom, Tori Manrin. All right, ladies, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, welcome to our session. I'm Serena White. I'm Director of Curriculum and Instruction in Monroe City Schools. It's a joy to be with you today. It's a joy to be at the Teacher Leader Summit, even though we're not there, that we're joining you guys. I have had the privilege to be at every Teacher Leader Summit since the first one. If any of you attended that one when it was in Lafayette, it was actually not in New Orleans. So every year I've had the privilege to attend. So this year is very different, as we all know. So I'm excited to be here. I have an incredible team. I am going to introduce them a little bit more real quick. First one is Rochelle Williams. She is a partner in crime with me here, partner in good here in Monroe City Schools. She is our Director of Student Services. She also works with our ELA curriculum and supports that. Then I have two incredible teachers, classroom teachers with us, Erica Kelly, a teacher at Barkdale Falk, and then I have Tori Manring, a teacher at Cypress Point Elementary. Also with me, I have two incredible partners that we partner with the Writing Revolution, and these ladies are the co-executives of the Writing Revolution. I have Dina Zolio and Tori Ann Vroom. So I want to welcome them. So we're going to talk about ELA, in the distance learning in a high-tech environment. And as we go through this presentation, we're going to share with you, we think it's very important that first of all, that you understand the curriculum, how we were set up in Monroe City Schools before we were March 13th. In order to understand what we did after March 13th, you have to understand how we were set up before, because our curriculum and our partners stayed in place during that time. And we think that that's really important. We think that that's essential as we go into this next school year. And so we're gonna share a little bit about that with you. Then we're gonna review the steps that we took to launch ELA in distance learning in Monroe City Schools. I know a lot of you probably saw our plan, you know, and as we were like everyone else, we were putting it together as we went. But, and I'm gonna have two ladies that are gonna share that actually did it. And they led the teaching from, of the guidebooks virtually. And so I think that their insight is definitely worth hearing. Then we're gonna discuss our plans for next year. And then we wanna make sure you have a chance to understand the options for utilizing the guidebooks in a high-tech distance learning environment. So now at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Rochelle Williams, because she's going to explain to you how we are set up in Monroe City Schools for our ELA instruction.
Good morning. Monroe City Schools, grades 3 through 12, all utilize the Louisiana Department of Education guidebooks. Each grade has 4 guidebooks per year, lasting around 9 weeks. But I think it's important that you know that initially we bought texts for every student instead of classroom sets, which proved to be very beneficial to us on March 13th, because we were able to send home with our students not only a Chromebook, but the text for that unit and everything that they needed to continue to use the guidebook during COVID-19 school closures. We also trained not only every regular ed teacher, but every special ed teacher, every gifted teacher in the curriculums as well. We trained them in the guidebook, we trained them with the diverse learner supports, and we offered them training with the TWR, the Writing Revolution. So every teacher understood the curriculum, every teacher understood what was going on in the diverse learner, and it was a marriage and a great combination for everyone. We partnered with the Writing Revolution to revolutionize our guidebook materials. An example of that you'll see with the teachers when they present a little later today, but like when the guidebook asks to write a paragraph, we utilized the strategy of the SPO that was taught, and the students' writing was more fluent, it was deeply embedded in the content, and it was just a better product when they wrote the paragraph. Also, the Writing Revolution helped us go through every lesson, every slide, every card to actually revolutionize those materials for the students. So our partnership is wonderful with the Writing Revolution. I think I'm not going to go into details because Dina and Tony will go into details with the next slides.
This time I want to introduce Dina and Tony, and so y'all will take it from here.
Thank you, Serena, and we feel the same. Our partnership has been amazing. My name is Dina Zoleo. I am the co-executive director of the Writing Revolution. I have been working with Monroe City Schools for the past probably 2.5 years or so now, and I am thrilled that I'm joined with my better half, the other co-executive director of TWR, Miss Tony Ann Vroom.
And just as thrilled to be here this morning. Good morning, everyone. So just to give you a little bit of background about the Writing Revolution and the Hochman method. So the Writing Revolution is a nonprofit organization that trains teachers and supports partner schools and districts in implementing the Hochman method. The Hochman method is a method of expository writing instruction, and we will show you how this method builds very carefully, starting at the sentence level, all the way up through the composition. Something else about the Writing Revolution, and you'll see it in the graphic on this next slide, is just how important writing can be in boosting not only students' writing ability, but their reading and their thinking. Okay, so on our next slide, here you'll see a graphic will be coming up. Thank you so much. And here you see on the left-hand side, this graphic of this light bulb that shows how the method builds. So it starts at the sentence level because the sentence is the foundation of all good writing. And if the students cannot produce a solid sentence, what is that paragraph and essay going to look like? So regardless of grade, we start at the sentence and build up to the paragraph. Ms. Williams mentioned the SPO, that's our single paragraph outline, and planning is a very important component of the Hochman method. We have students plan before they write. So we build from the sentence to the paragraph. We teach students how to revise by using those sentence level strategies. This will build to the composition where students also plan with a multiple paragraph outline or an MPO. And now we have a very solid foundation for students to be able to write argumentatively or write research papers. And embedded throughout the method are important study skills that are just as much about reading as they are about writing: underlining, note-taking, and summarizing. We have the image on the right to show how the strategies of the Hochman method spiral straight on up through the grades. The same strategies that are being used in elementary school can be used in middle and high school. And that's because all of the activities are embedded in whatever content students are learning, which you see going across the bottom. So depending on the content that students are writing about, the strategies can become quite rigorous. In elementary school, they may be doing sentence level work. And in high school, they're doing sentence level work as well, but it's around more challenging content. And just the last piece about the Writing Revolution, which you'll see on this next slide, is how writing, reading, and thinking are three inseparable skills. So we feel very strongly that when we teach students how to write, and this is also something that's heavily backed by the research, that it boosts their reading and their thinking abilities. Writing is thinking. You can't write well about something that you don't know well. So we see writing as a tool to boost students' analytical thinking. And the same for reading. When students write about what they read, they're processing that information, they're going to retain it more. And there are certain structures that you could teach in writing that will help students read better. And that's why the writing strategies work so harmoniously with the guidebooks in particular.
Thank you, Tony Ann. So now we're going to look at Monroe City, what happened and how we developed our distance learning plan. So I'm going to pull this up here. And many of you probably saw it. It was linked in many of the documents that DOE released as a model for how to do distance education this spring. Just a little background. On March 13th, we were in in the same boat that everyone in the state was in. I will be honest with you, that week, a few days earlier in that week, I had begun and it texted several of our colleagues. Of course, we were still busy getting in schools, doing our normal observations, all the things that normally go on in our day-to-day work when school is in session and we have students in our building. And I text them and say, okay, I think we might need to put together a distance learning plan, thinking it was a few weeks out, never thinking it was that Friday. I am glad that I did get ahead of it a couple of days, because I did go ahead and reach out to Zoom. I did go ahead and reach out to a few of the other providers that had sent us offers. And so we began to, so when March 13th happened, we kind of hit the ground running. We already had the contract signed for Zoom. We already had it signed for Zern. There were things in place that helped us to move quickly. One of the things so on March 13th, as you know, schools were closed. Over that weekend, I don't know if you know, those of you who are classroom teachers joining us, but over the weekend, there were conference calls all weekend. So those of you who are in higher district leadership are familiar with that. And so we had to come up with a plan that weekend. On the following Monday and Tuesday, we released paper packets, and those were given out at our school sites. So they were up on the 16th, they were printed and ready to go out on the 17th. That being said, we have 19 schools in Monroe City Schools. 3 of our schools wanted to go ahead and try, and remember at this point, we did not know how long this would go on. Wanted to go ahead and try checking out the Chromebooks and try some virtual learning. And so they asked our superintendent, and they were allowed to go ahead and do that. After the 17th, starting on the 18th, so remember this is all that week, but starting on the 18th, myself, I started giving intro to Zoom sessions. Jody Moorhead, one of our IT facilitators, started giving Google sessions back to back. Now, we were already utilizing Google, but as probably same as in your district, we had some people who were excellent at Google Classroom. They didn't need any more support. And we had some that knew they had a password for it, knew how to use their drive because all of their curriculum documents were in there, but they had never utilized Google Classroom. And so we quickly put together those trainings virtually, and those went back to back. I know within the first week that we did those, Jody and I both trained over 700 teachers, and we have about 750 classroom teachers. So we just, it was a priority. As soon as they had attended my intro to Zoom session, they started scheduling sessions with their students. Even the schools that had not checked out the Chromebooks, because we knew that most kids had some way of getting online, especially since the cable company was offering the reduced package so that they could access the internet. So we just started, we tried it, and we got out there, and we got amazing response and attendance from our kids. I know that someone put in the chat earlier that, oh, I'm so glad to see faces. I mean, that was a decision when we were setting up this session, that it's not that I like to see my face on the screen, but I know from watching my own child and hearing from other parents, seeing people's faces, their classmates' faces, their teachers' faces was as much as important, if not more important, than the content that was shared during that time. So there's definitely an element of that we don't want to forget in this process. So that being said, so we started the Zoom sessions, during that time. So then we had 2 weeks of where people were doing Zoom kind of hit and miss. And then we had paper packets out there. Then we had our spring break. And we all had spring break at some point during this time. That allowed us to regroup and come up with this definitive plan. And so the Monday after spring break was April 6th. At that point, we handed out Chromebooks to anyone who needed them. We did 1 Chromebook per family per site. This spring, every student will have, this fall, every student will have one, will be 1-to-1. We still had the paper packets. They could still pick those up. They could still come and get their student materials. Because again, like Rochelle was saying, something that was essential and very needed is that every student have the materials that they need. And if they didn't have the actual paper copy, then we made sure it was available digitally. The PDF of the document or the text was uploaded, and the teachers will share that in a minute. Our administrators held meetings through Zoom, and they established those schedules. One thing that we did ask, and I think that this is important, is that really it's hard, if not impossible, for a district, especially a district with 19 schools, to set every schedule. That is something that, to me, that's a building level. And so that's what they set their schedules, and they shared them with us. Now, one thing I will say that allowed us to push all this out, because I've talked to other people in other districts, is that we did have a district contract with Remind, and we utilized Remind before this happened. So we had a way of communicating with our parents. With most of them, we still had some who had forgotten their code or their numbers had changed. We understand that. But overall, we had a system, and all we had to do is put that information out for on our websites and Facebook accounts for our schools to get those who weren't involved. So from April 6th to May 15th, this is the schedule we followed, our basic plan that we followed. If teachers still had core content to cover, if they still had a guidebook that they were finishing, they finished that guidebook, and that's what Tori and Erica will share about in a minute. If they were a math teacher who still had lessons, they finished that core content. If they had concluded it, then they did do other things, obviously. We all do that. Something here, you'll notice that our music, our art, our PE, and I had forgotten library, but don't worry, our principals didn't. Our librarians also held sessions. So all of these teachers held sessions that their students could join. And I will say that, I'm a parent also of a 5th grader, and those were vastly important to those students. One thing that's very, very important is that special ed was not left out of this. And so at this point, I'm going to ask Rochelle to speak to special ed.
We made it mandatory for our special ed teachers to attend the regular ed Zoom sessions. That way they could see what was going on with the students and what they needed to help students with. Aside from going to the regular ed sessions, they held their own sessions with their special ed students to provide more instruction, more guidance, remediation, and what was needed. Not only as it was documented on their IEP, but also what the student might need to help them, support them with the regular instructions that they were getting as well. We also went to my own so they can have books read aloud. They can receive books read aloud to them. We have always utilized read and write, so information that the teacher presents can be read aloud to them as well. I think it was a great marriage with everyone. Even our parents attended some of Serena's Zoom sessions, so they were also supporting students as well. I would like to just give our staff a hand because they did whatever it took to support our students. We didn't really have any issues with paras, our teachers, special ed teachers, anyone actually doing the trainings for Zoom or the Google Classroom. Everybody was on board to support the students. So I will, if any, I see a couple of our teachers are on this session, I would just like to give them a shout out at this time for that. Yay.
Yes,
As well.
I want to second it, because I will say that everything that we did at virtual learning, our distance learning, it was because our teachers drove it. And honestly, when I led the sessions for the intro to Zoom, they were so concerned about their students and their welfare, not just academically, but their social and emotional welfare, and just wanting to check on them, that they were excited to engage with them through a virtual classroom to know how they're doing and check in on them. So it was good. It was really good.
And initially, Serena talked about the paper packets that we issued to the students. Well, the partnership that we had with TWR is so strong and so great that the first thing we got on March 13th was a call from TWR. How can we help? And we told them about the paper packets. We told them where they could find them on our website. And they said, okay, we're going to get our team together and we're going to revolutionize those packets. And we gave them access to it. And before you knew it, the packets had been revolutionized. It was just a wonderful collaboration, I know. And, you know, that's just, if you can just pick up the phone and have a phone call, like, how can we help? You know, because on the 13th, it was almost like a little panic mode initially. We were like, what are we going to do? So I wanted to also bring that out about the partnership and the hard work that TWR did with us.
And before I hand it back over to TWR for a second, I wanted to share, many of you probably saw postings or read articles, we did have a TV station. So our local TV station offered us a channel that they weren't using. And then Comcast, our cable in this area, partnered with them. And so we were able to broadcast lessons. So we did have teachers come in one at a time to record lessons that we then broadcast over TV to catch students who weren't able to access us virtually. Now that's something we're going to keep those lessons and keep that recording ability so that we can drop those videos of the lessons. They can link them into their Google Classroom this coming year, but it won't be ongoing. It is ongoing through the summer for summer support, but since we can't do summer school as we'd like to yet, we hope to in July, it is a way that we're able to share with our students and have contact with them through the summer. So now I'm going to go back to the presentation and I'm going to turn it over to the Writing Revolution.
Thank you, Serena. So I'd like to take this opportunity just to share a little bit more in depth about the partnership and what that entailed. So in the spring of 2017, TWR started to work with MCS by providing training. And so the first step was that we trained cohorts of ELA, social studies, and special education teachers in our Advancing Thinking Through Writing introductory course. We're excited to announce that we just wrapped up last month virtually our math course for TWR, which again was solely dedicated to math teachers learning the strategies. And the power of this is that when students are immersed in the strategies, the TWR strategies, and are seeing it class to class, grade to grade, it really is the game changer in a building, because again, you're providing a very common, consistent language around writing instruction that students are hearing, and it really can produce significant student outcomes, which Monroe City is starting to see, which has really been very exciting. We also conduct site visits where we've gone down to Monroe City schools and have seen their elementary, their middle, and their high schools. We've seen classrooms, and these site visits serve the dual purpose of assessing the implementation progress, but also we're visiting classrooms and we're getting to identify areas of strength from the teachers, and then areas where they may need some additional support. And then we're able to give very targeted feedback on how to help them and give that support. Speaking of support for implementation, All of the Monroe City schools, all 19 schools, have access to TWR's online resource library, which houses templates and videos and models and exemplars for the teachers, which is really, really helpful. Monroe City teachers also got customized feedback from our team, where we were able to look at materials they created and actually give them some real, specific, again, targeted feedback on how to improve them or next steps. We were able to assess their student writing at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year so that we could actually monitor the progress that students were making. And then Ms. Williams alluded to it before, but one of the most exciting moments for us in this partnership was that in Monroe City, we were able to establish the first ever TWR Revolutionary Team. And what this means is that we identified, in coordination with the district, we identified about 23 teachers from grades 3 to 10, where they were really using the strategies with high levels of fidelity in their classroom. And they were tasked to go through the guidebooks, every single lesson of the guidebooks, and actually find places where they can embed TWR to assess student learning. And so we call it revolutionize because, again, sometimes the guidebook was calling for a paragraph. And again, the TWR team, the revolutionary team, decided to make it a single paragraph outline or a sentence level activity. So they did this huge work. We were able to, again, give them feedback and partner with them. So it was a great collaborative effort. And then they were able to the district was able to take those materials and then disseminate them throughout all of the schools, which was really, again, amazing to see. And then last but not least, this April, we kicked off a very small pilot called Kelly's Kids. Now, Mr. Kelly Downing is a faculty member, a senior faculty member at TWR who has worked closely with MCS schools for the past few years. And he was able to, along with members of our TWR team, develop a very succinct module of online platform of TWR activities that are embedded around texts related to timely topics. And so students were able to go on there and practice their TWR strategies and skills around these articles and these texts. This was also co-facilitated by Monroe City's own Mr. Jesse Flunder, who is an 8th grade teacher at Lee Junior High. And so this is also a very exciting piece of our partnership this year. So in closing, it's been it's been great working with MCS, and we really do believe that they have established the blueprint, or the national blueprint, for writing instruction in this country. So we are very grateful for doing this work with them.
Thank you, Dina. We just have, our partnership with the Writing Revolution has been wonderful. So we could not talk about our ELA instruction without talking about them, because it's such a integral part of our ELA instruction now. And honestly, we were disappointed that we weren't going to have results this year, because we saw good gains last year, but we were anticipating great results from the student work and the progress monitoring that we were doing so far. So at this point, though, I'm going to turn this over to one of our teachers, Tori Manring, and let her share about her experience.
Hi, everyone. Like Serena said, my name is Tori Manring. A little bit about me: I am a first-year teacher in Monroe City. I teach at Cypress Point University Elementary, and I'm in a 4th grade ELA classroom. Prior to this, I completed a year-long clinical residency in a 4th grade ELA and social studies classroom. Now, I tell you this just so you know a little bit more about me, but also to let you know that this is my first year at this. I'm not someone who has been using technology in the classroom. To be honest, earlier this year, I tried Google Classroom once and quickly decided, I was like, oh no, I'm not good at this. I need to work more at it. But whenever the COVID crisis came, we really had to leap into that. So again, I share that with you just so you know that really, if you take a leap of faith, you'll be able to do this as well. Okay, so I'm going to start out by telling you how I got started. So in the beginning, the first part of this was to get in contact with all of my students. As Serena said, we were able to utilize Remind, but that did not reach all parents and all students. So I made a point to make sure to call all of my parents. This was really great because I was able to check in on them, make sure they were okay, make sure their basic needs were met, and understand where they were at during this crisis. And then after that, we were able to discuss technology in their homes. So if they did not have access to technology, I was able to tell them that they were able to pick up a Chromebook from the schools, and then also talk about, how many kids were in the home. I knew that for the most part, but just wanted to refresh my memory. I saw a question earlier about how do you make sure students' schedules didn't overlap? Well, like we said a while ago, it was one Chromebook per household at each school. And so students in high school could get a Chromebook, as well as students in elementary could get a Chromebook. But even with that, I was talking to my parents, and one of my families, they had an older sister, in 6th grade, and she was in 4th grade, and their schedules collided. They had class at the same time. So I was able to work with that family, say, okay, well, you can always use your phone or a tablet if you have that. But if not, that let me know that, okay, I need to record my lessons and post them after. And so I talked with that parent, and, we kind of developed a plan where older sister would watch on Tuesdays, younger sister would watch on Thursdays, and then on their days off, they would just watch the recording. And so it definitely is possible with those recordings for them to still tune in and watch the lessons and get that material. And so after that, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. After that, I became more familiar with technology. Like Serena said, we had those Zoom and Google Classroom trainings. If your district does not have those, you can definitely find trainings online at other places. But a step further than that, I set up practice Zoom meetings for myself. I invited my friends, my family, my coworkers, so I could kind of practice and become more familiar with it. And same with Google Classroom. I set up practice classrooms, practice assignments to just become more familiar with it myself. And of course, whenever kids came, I still learned a lot, and there were a few kinks along the road, but that helped me become more confident in it. And then lastly, I introduced technology to my students and my family. So to do that, I set up little videos showing them how to use Zoom and how to use Google Classroom, and then other small things that we did along the way. So these were great. I sent them out via Remind on my teacher website and on Google Classroom. That way students could revisit these videos if they had any questions. Of course, there are some students and families who needed a little bit more support. So I had a few FaceTimes with kids to set up their sound or their video. And that was a lot of work in the beginning, but truly, I think it helped me run more smoothly once we got everything figured out. Also, we learned that we need to make it as easy as possible for our parents and our students. So this takes a little bit of us thinking about it and pre-work ahead of time. But one of the things that my 4th grade team did was create a flyer where students and parents could access all of their Zoom codes and all of their passwords. This made it much easier for our kids to log on to their sessions and get that material that we so desperately need. So you can see here they were able to access ELA, math, science and social studies, along with their ancillary schedule. And at the top, we had a weekly parent meeting for our parents. You may note that our password for all of our 4th grade meetings was the same. This made it a little bit easier for our students to log in, so they weren't always searching for a password. So now I want to go over what it was like in the beginning, what Zoom and distance learning was like in the beginning for us. So in the beginning, after the first maybe 2 lessons, we realized that we needed to set some classroom expectations for our students. So I worked with my other 4th grade teachers, and we set these expectations that you can see on your left. We really realized we needed this because we had kids laying down, kids asleep, all of those things. And oftentimes, I think teachers may fall into the trap of saying, well, they showed up for Zoom, and that's really all I can ask of them during this time. And you're right, it is a really big step for them to show up for Zoom. And we need to applaud that, praise them. However, we needed a little bit more structure. So again, you can look at those examples to the right, or to the left, I'm sorry. That's just what our students needed. We shared these with our kids during our lessons, and we also shared these with our parents. That way the parents can help enforce this at home, and we were transparent across the board. And then again, I made sure to record those lessons, upload them to Google Classroom, and even send them out via Remind if needed. Student engagement in the beginning was pretty basic, to be completely honest. I shared my screen so students could view the PowerPoint like Serena is now. I would also share the text with students if we were reading in class. Of course, they could have picked that up from school, but not all of my kiddos did that. So I made sure to share it virtually, that way they weren't flipping different tabs from Zoom to their digital copy. And then other than that, really my engagement with students actually raising their hand and me scrolling through the videos on the side to select a student to speak. So of course that only allowed one student to talk at a time, but at that time, that's better than not having class and not having any student engagement. And then lastly, in the beginning, I really pushed independent reading with my students. Monroe City Schools utilizes Accelerated Reader, or AR. And so I set weekly goals for my students, similar to what I already did in the classroom for them. I made little videos saying, here's your goal, or cheering them on as they went. And then if students did not have access to books at home, two great resources were getepic.com and then YouTube videos of read alouds, where you can check those out. So now I want to go over what I learned during this process. Student engagement is an area that I was definitely able to improve in. So anytime I saw partner work in those guidebook lessons, I really changed that to 3 different things. The first way I utilized partner work was in the chat feature. So I would ask a question and students would respond in the chat bar. This would either be visible to all students or just to me. I would make a note that make sure your students can't chat each other, because that can become a distraction. But I utilized that chat feature, and then I would pull answers on my PowerPoint, or I would call on other students to expand on their answer. Another way you can engage students is utilizing breakout rooms. So this is a great way to really incorporate your special education teachers and your translators. So my special education teacher, a translator, and oftentimes our para were in these classes with me. So when I separated students, I made sure my ESL students were with my translator, my special education students were with our special education teacher, and then other students were grouped accordingly for what I saw fit, just like you would do in your normal classroom. I would pop in and out of those breakout rooms, talk to them a little bit, and they would come back, and either that would be the end of it, or we would share a little bit further. And then lastly, we had whole group conversations. I was able to do this using conversation signals that I had already used in my classroom. So students are pretty familiar with it. So if you're not familiar with those, we just had where students wanted to add something, they would hold up one finger. I'm sorry, they wanted to have a new idea. It'd be one finger. If they wanted to add on to what someone had already said, they'd hold up 2 fingers. If they agreed with someone and they could tell me why they agreed with that person, they would give a thumbs up. If they disagreed and can prove why they disagreed, they would do a little handshake. So that really allowed us to have group conversations more productively, because I knew how students were going to respond, and it wasn't completely random. I did not know what was going to come out of their mouths. So that definitely helped. And then lastly, I just had students read slides in the text whenever possible. This just kind of reminded them back in the classroom what they would normally do and make it more normal for our students. The biggest thing that I have learned throughout this process is that some of our activities need to be reevaluated for virtual learning. Activities that work really well in the classroom do not work really well on Zoom, just because you're virtual, you can't see them, you can't help them, all of those things, or help them in person, I'm sorry. So with that, I definitely challenge you to change those activities if you need to. As always, though, keep the objective in mind. If you complete that objective of the original activity in your new activity, you're good to go. And so now I'm going to walk you through a few examples of how I reevaluated our activities to better suit our students in learning. So these are all examples from what I did with my students in the past few weeks. So they are fourth grade materials, but I do think that these same principles can be applied to all grade levels. So in this first activity, our objective was to understand that dialogue can be used to describe characters and events. On the left-hand side, this was the original slide from Learn Zillion in the guidebooks. So students were asked to reread chapter 5 with a partner, and then as they read, list 10 different dialogue tags, and then identify how these tags help explain the characters and events in the chapter. So a few problems that you may see automatically with this is that students don't have a partner with them at home. Of course, students, we hope they have the text in front of them, but not everyone picked it up. So they may not have the text with them. And then also them completely rereading it may be a lot of time during our lesson, and we only had an hour on Zoom. And of course, we have more time than that in person. And so instead, what I did, I showed students the slide on the right. I said, okay, guys, we've already talked about dialogue tags earlier in the lesson. I'm going to scroll through this chapter, and I want you to find any dialogue tags that you see. When you find them, I want you to put them in the chat bar. So for this activity, we utilized the chat feature. And so I shared my screen. I slowly scrolled through that chapter, and students added dialogue tags to the chat bar. Once we were done, I said, okay, we're done sharing. Don't add any more dialogue tags. And I pulled some dialogue tags to the screen or highlighted them using our annotation tools on Zoom. And then we discussed that second question with a whole group conversation, agreeing, adding on, all of those things. For this next example, again from the guidebooks, The Whipping Boy, our objective was to recognize and explain the meaning of figurative language found within the text. So on the left, you can see the original slide was that partners reread chapter 2. Of The Whipping Boy, identify 2 examples of figurative language and add them to the chart. And then use context clues to determine the meaning of that figurative language. So again, the problems, students don't have a partner with them, they may not have the text, and they were not able to access that chart. Of course, some students had it, some students didn't. So we had work for all students. So instead, I decided to utilize Google Classroom for this activity. In our lesson, we discussed figurative language. We talked about multiple examples. We found that literal meaning, but I wanted to assess my students. So I utilized a question on Google Classroom where after class, students had a little bit of homework. They went and answered this question, took them probably about 5 minutes. I also linked the text with the question. And this allowed me to assess my students' learning and see how they were understanding figurative language, even from a virtual classroom. So our next example is from The Whipping Boy, lesson 25. The objective was to answer questions about the text to prepare for class discussion. So normally in this lesson, students work with a partner to answer this worksheet on the left and answer those questions. Now, again, students don't have a partner. I considered sending this out for homework prior to the lesson, but I really thought, I was like, okay, I think my students may need a little bit more support than just doing it at home. So instead, I made it a group activity for our students. So I would show the PowerPoint slide on the right. We would read the excerpt as a class. I had another student read it, and then I had students read those questions. Once we made sure students understood the questions, everyone was good to go, I sent them out into breakout rooms. I also sent this question in a chat, that way students could reference back to it and remember what was asked of them. So students discussed. I popped in and out. Again, our special education teacher and our translator were in there with their respective students to really give them the support they need. And then we came back and I called on a certain group to answer. And then we went through, and you can see I highlighted the evidence that they found to determine the meaning of the word varmint. This was a really great way to keep them engaged. I made a little bit of a game. They got competitive. They were ready to answer. And this turned this original worksheet that'd be hard for students virtually into something more accessible online. And then my last example, thank you for hanging on tight. We're almost done with my portion of it. The last objective is to refer to details in the text while explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. And so you can see here, both of these slides are from the original PowerPoint. So on the left, students were asked to determine why might the prince not have any friends. And then on the right, students were asked, why is the whipping boy, or Jimmy, so surprised that Prince Brat wants to run away? And how does Jimmy try to convince the prince to stay? So remember those two questions. We'll come back to those in just a second. But this lesson was filled with questions like this. And so, of course, we could have used whole group conversations, but I think my students would have gotten a little tired of it and they would have lost engagement toward the end. So instead, I chose to use a TWR activity like Dina and Tony Ann were discussing earlier, which we'll see on the next slide. So here you can see the activity on the right. The directions for this were to write S if the words form a complete sentence, capitalize and punctuate the sentences, write F if the words are a sentence fragment, change the fragments into complete sentences. And so during this, students were able to revisit those sentence-based skills, but also I can understand their comprehension of the text so far. So if you look at the first one, our rewritten sentence, this was a fragment, but our rewritten sentence was Prince Brat pulls pranks on almost everybody in the castle. So from this, we were able to have conversations. Well, how do you think people reacted to Prince Brat pulling pranks? What do people think about Prince Brat? And we were able to come up with those same character traits. He's rude, he's selfish, that they would have answered in the original slide. And then toward the bottom for numbers 4 and 5, our rewritten sentences were Prince Brat and Jimmy run away from the castle, and then Jimmy has no say in what happens in his life. So we're able to discuss, well, how do you think Jimmy felt whenever Prince Brat made him run away? Did he try to stop him? How? Why do you think he felt like that? Well, he had no say in what happened in his life. So those are questions that were already in the original slides, but we're able to use them here. It was a little bit quicker for students. It was different, more engaging, and it also hit on that sentence-based skills, which we know that all students need. And then on the left, I love this picture because you can really see some of the students, they're leading this. I was typing, but they were telling me what to type. They were excited to share. You see one student kind of jumping up because they enjoy these activities and they enjoy participating, in this way. And then my last thought for you all is this quote, you can only grow if you are willing to feel awkward and uncomfortable when you try something new. So during virtual learning, I'm sure all of us, myself included, have felt very awkward and very uncomfortable. It's weird talking to a screen with no one else around and pretending your kids are there. However, if you're willing to attempt this and try, learn new things, your kids really will appreciate it. During all of this, they're not looking for the perfect lesson that we're used to having in our classrooms. They're looking for you to show up and be there for them. At the end of the day, they really will appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tori. Like I said, Tori is a 4th grade teacher at Cypress Point Elementary here in Monroe City Schools. Now I'm going to turn it over to Miss Erica Kelly. She is a 6th grade ELA teacher at Barkdale Falk Elementary. So Erica.
All right, thank you, Serena. Good morning, everybody. As she stated, my name is Erica Kelly, and I'm going to be talking about using Google Classroom as a way to provide, insight to your students during this time of, our challenges that we're facing. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about me. I've been teaching over 8 years in elementary schools. I have taught in rural and urban school districts in Northeast Louisiana. And I put that in there because I think it's really, really important, because for me, those were two different worlds. When I worked in a rural school setting, you know, of course, they didn't have much funding. Technology was not really a big priority. There were teachers that were using overhead projectors. Some were still handwriting tests and making copies. I mean, that just was the life that we were living. It just was not a big deal for us to use technology. If we did have smart boards, some of them may not be working. We would try to get them working, but you know, it took a while for it to get, you know, fixed. So when I left that and I came to Monroe City Schools, which is an urban school district, oh my God, it was like a wonderland. The school that I work in, we have a 1-to-1 ratio where every student has access to a Chromebook. Internet was available for everyone. We had working, materials and supplies, and and if we had an issue with something, we could put in an IT report, and they actually came. Maybe not that day, but they actually came. That was a big deal. We had ongoing professional development as it related to technology, and that helped to enhance my experience. It helped me to become more comfortable with technology and to utilize it as I teach. So I did want to acknowledge that everybody's not in the same place as it relates to that, but I will just, encourage you to just do the best you can with what you have. That's all we're really able to do anyway. And again, I currently teach 3rd through 6th grade gifted math and ELA. So I do Guidebooks and Eureka. Yay me, yay. All right. So virtual ELA lessons can be, I put this in here for us to just kind of think. If you've ever taught ELA through a virtual platform, it can be challenging, it can be daunting, it can be lengthy, especially if you have students that don't like to write. Oh my God, it can be like pulling teeth. It can be something to really, really deal with, but it also can be wonderful. It can be exciting. It can be exhilarating. Doing virtual lessons gives you a chance to do something out of the box, something new, something fresh. And so I want us all to think about that. If you have some apprehensions about it, just know that it is a great opportunity to take your lessons to the next level. And so for me, my method of choice was Google Classroom. It was something that I actually love. As you can see here, I have my different classes. I'm a gifted teacher, as I stated. I'm itinerant, so I move around to different schools. So having this is just a godsend because everything is online. So I can separate each one of my classes and all of my students into groups. I can assign whatever it is I need them to do into each one of those classes. You can, kind of decorate it or set it up any way you want. And again, it's just very, very versatile. And it really helped me tremendously as we were making this transition with what we're doing with virtual learning. Okay, so in the beginning, I actually used Google Classroom way before the pandemic happened, but I used it as a novelty. Again, with gifted students, the way I have my classroom set up is that we have to do what the district requires. We have a scope and sequence, so everybody's on the same page in terms of what we should be learning and what book and at what time. And so they have to do the baseline activities anyway. But then I always assign additional work, additional reports. I had them doing autobiographies, and I had them creating raps on different little ELA topics. So I was using this just as a novelty, saying, hey guys, let's get on here, let's, talk back and forth, watch this video on YouTube, or do this quick assignment, or I just want to say hello to you guys. So that's what I did. So it wasn't new to us, but what I will say, if I want to be honest, I was a novice at it. Again, it was a novelty for me. But in my middle bullet here, you'll see my students were intermediate users. And it really intimidated me a little bit because they were kind of taking the lead and saying, hey guys, let's get together, let's do this, let's do that. It's wonderful, but what I had to do was kind of release my control. Because as teachers, we can be control freaks, right? Because my kids were like, well, yeah, let's get together, let's do this on this day. And I was like, wait, but I'm the teacher, let me, orchestrate everything. But then I had to realize, no, this is what you want. You want them to collaborate. You want them to be excited about learning. And so I kind of had to let go a little bit. And this platform really allowed me to do that. So again, this is in, 2018 when I was utilizing it. And again, I continue to use it even throughout this process of being distance. So I wish I could say that my virtual learning classes are wonderful. All of my students show up to every single class. They turned in all of their assignments because I changed lives, right? That is not what happened. I did have some challenges, and I wanted to be honest about that there are going to be some challenges with virtual learning. The first thing for me was the feedback. Again, with teaching ELA, it's heavily on writing, right? For 6th grade is what I'm specifically talking about. We have a lot of assignments with regards to writing. And so I thought I was doing my job when my student would turn in an assignment and I would go through with my red highlighter and, say, you need to change this, you need to fix this. You did a good job, but you need to fix this, this, and this. And when I would give it back to them, a lot of them would say, oh, Miss Kelly, all I see is red. All they saw was the negative part. And I thought, okay, I've got to change this, because what we know is our kids will shut down, right? We have to be very careful about how we critique them and the words that we use to help them along this process. So my feedback has to be in real time when they assign, or when I assign something to them and they turn it in. Before the week is over, I would say within the next 2 days after they turn it in, I'm giving them some type of feedback, and it's in the sandwich method. The sandwich method is something I learned in a group called Toastmasters, which is a public speaking group I've been a part of for years, but it's about giving constructive criticism, how you tell them something positive, tell them something they need to work on, and then follow it up with something positive. So again, you have 2 positives for every, harsh critique for them. And so then you're not really tearing them down, you know what I mean? Because again, writing can be so just heavy for some students, and you want to encourage them to keep going. And so using that technique can be very beneficial. The second thing is to continue to be the constant in your students' life. With all the uncertainty that's going on, everything that we're feeling as adults, we know our students are feeling the same things, right? But one thing that we can do is just be a constant. Hey, we're here. This is our environment. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's, look at the task at hand. Let's stay focused. And that's what we as teachers, that's what we do well. And so being a constant in my students' life has been a really good thing for them and me. The third thing, do your best to keep your students engaged. And so I would set my lessons up, as I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides, so that they had to kind of report daily. I didn't want to just give them something at the beginning of the week and say, hey, turn this in by the end of the week. Maybe they do it, maybe they don't. I don't hear from them for a couple of days. I didn't want that. Just like a regular classroom, they come daily, right? So I wanted them to continue that process with this virtual option as well. So I tried to keep them engaged with daily assignments. And then number 4, have fun days and play games. I made sure not to make it so overly academic that we couldn't have fun. I made sure that we had a fun day where we played Kahoot, where we played Jeopardy, where we did all these things that we're still learning, because, we can have fun and learn too by playing games. And I wanted to keep that going because that's what I did in my real classroom. So this is a great platform to do that with. All right, and so TWR became the catalyst to improve student writing. So again, TWR is the writing revolution, and that's what Ms. Dino talked about earlier. I loved this whole process. As a matter of fact, I have my book here with me. I keep it close to my heart. I love the training that Monroe City Schools gave us with this because it really helped. If you are an ELA teacher, you teach certain grades, there's a certain expectation of what the kids should be doing at their level, right? And whenever you see that it's not happening, it's like, what happened? Where did the ball drop? I love TWR because it helps you figure out exactly what they need to work on. It helps you target them without making a big deal out of it. It's a whole group assignment. You know what I mean? It's not like we're picking out one person. This is something we can all work on together. So I love that. And so here are some examples that I have from the guidebook lesson, Out of the Dust. As you can see over to the far left, I started with this core activity. Our team, again, I think Ms. Serena talked about that. Our teachers got together and they created activities that went along with each guidebook lesson, and they inserted it in different, segments of the lesson so we could work on that writing, and I love it. So here's an example of one, sentence expansion. And the way we describe that is making a sentence pop. You know how you can take a kernel or something small or thought and expand it. And so that's what we will work on. We will talk about that. So we did that a little bit, in class on this particular guidebook lesson. And then, as you guys know, we're really big about, let me get my word right, annotations, right? As they read these books, we want them to annotate, highlight, make comments. And so for me, I was getting frustrated with my kids using sticky notes. I love it that they do that, but sometimes they would lose the sticky notes. They wouldn't keep up with it. So I also had them to take all the information and put it into a Google slide, and that made it more permanent. And then even if they left, as we know students do from time to time, they leave from your school and go to another one. If they're still in your district, they can still pull it up if it's in a Google slide because the information is transferable. So this is just an example of one of my students and what they did on the Dust Bowl. And I'm very visual. So I'm like, yeah, make your annotations, but show me pictures, you know, show me what it would look like. So at the end of the guidebook lesson, actually they would have everything they would need for the culminating writing task, but they would also have a PowerPoint or a Google slide presentation that they could also present to the class and talk about what they learned. So that was something that I did. And then lastly over here, this is an example of a writing activity. So I would have journal activities throughout the week for my kids to write. So again, I'm trying to get them excited about writing. And in order for me to do that, I have to get them to write about things they like, things that they can relate to. So again, I don't know if we were actually on Out of the Dust at the time, but I knew they were familiar with it. And Out of the Dust, if you know, this story is set in the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression. People are going through economic hardships. They're dealing with this dust and they can't breathe and they have to wear masks. So it was so fitting that at the time, it was in February, that all this stuff was going on in Wuhan, right? There's this mysterious illness that's going on and people can't breathe and it's affecting the economies. And at the time, it was like thousands of miles away, right? It hadn't really hit us the way that it is now. So the writing activity was, you know, let's do a little research. We used Google and did a little research on Wuhan, and we kind of got to see the actual city and where it was located. And I loved all that. My students loved it too. So then I asked them, I said, well, are you and your family prepared for the coronavirus? You know, if this virus leaves this area, because at the time it was spreading, but it was still, you know, overseas, if it actually comes to our city, well, I'll take that back. It had started spreading, but it wasn't affecting us directly. Let me say that. If it actually comes to our city, are you prepared? And the kids at the time were saying, no, Ms. Kelly, why are you asking us this? This is scary. So, well, no, I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to think, utilize what you know about Out of the Dust and how those people had to prepare for this situation, you know, and think about if you had to prepare, what would you have to do? Are you and your family prepared? So it made them think. And we know writing is about thinking, right? But it was something they could relate to because they're talking about their family. So this is a sample of what my particular student, one of them, turned in. And it was so interesting. The very first line, my family, is not prepared for the coronavirus. So of course the content was so, you know, enthralling for me. I loved reading about it. But of course the teacher in me had to look for certain things. I'm looking for positives. I'm looking for subordinating conjunctions. I'm looking to make sure your sentences make sense. If you notice down here on the second line, I have it highlighted in red. This person says we should get the kind that doesn't spoil though. So she's talking about food. So here's a great opportunity for me to reiterate the fact that the way we write and the way we speak are not the same, right? That's something you would really say in a conversation, but when you're writing, it should be more formal. And that was something I really had to work on my kids with, formally writing. And so, you know, I did Dr. 10 points for that, but coming on down, if you notice, I did use that sandwich method. So again, for my kids at this time, they had to write 9 to 10 sentences every time they had any type of writing assignment. And so they did that. So she knew that was like a check, that was a plus. So the one thing she had to do was that one revision, you know, just revise that one sentence. There could have been some more things that could have been revised, but because I didn't want to tear them down, I didn't want to beat them up with everything that's wrong. I just wanted to pick one small thing. Hey, work on this one thing. And again, come back with the fact that, you know, you only missed 10 points, but you got a 90, which is really, really good. So again, that's that method of giving them feedback, having them work on something, not overwhelming them, but utilizing the writing revolution, guidebooks, and the real world to get them to write. So that worked really well for me. Okay, so again, using Google Classroom, this is what I did. If you go on Google Classroom, you know, the very first thing you'll see is the stream, which is just the outline of every comment or anything that you would say daily to your students. So the way that I did it was that I organized my lessons and post assignments each day. And I love Google Classroom because you can set it in advance and schedule it to post at a certain time every day. So for the most part, if I did it in advance, like the day before or days ahead, I would schedule my assignments to post at 7 a.m., each day, so that every single day they have to come in and find out what their assignment is. So again, this prevents students from working ahead of me because I can't stand that. Don't get ahead of me. I'm a control freak. I'm sorry. I'm working on it. So it will allow them to stay paced and then encourage daily check-ins and work activity. And then I would also start each message with a positive statement, because I'm like this in my real classroom anyway. Hey guys, it's happy Tuesday. It's happy Wednesday. Let's have a great day. And so however you are in your classroom, bring that to this online platform. They need that. They want some things to stay the same, and you can still stay positive. And you never know how one little small positive statement will impact that kid, because kids have bad days too. They're going through all kinds of things that sometimes we don't always know or are aware of, but kindness goes a long way. And just doing that in your post can really change someone's, trajectory, or make them even be more engaged in what you have to say because you're kind to them. So. Okay, so something else. This is part one. Part two is on the next slide. And so as I continue, so the next thing is, again, going back on my stream, I would just have that simple post. Hey, it's happy Tuesday. Today we're going to be on lesson 12. Check out this little intro video that's below, and then check your classwork for more detailed activities. So again, this is the classwork part where they could click on it. And as you can see, it's listed by day. And so every assignment corresponds with the daily activities in classwork. So every day there's a set of classwork, and my classwork is detailed. As you can see, as I have this arrow going down here, it says each assignment detail was numbered to provide a clear, achievable list for students to complete. So my assignments normally will have 3 parts. It would be complete some type of assignment, read a chapter, and then complete a lesson. So inevitably, you guys know we have the kid that said, I don't know where my book is. I don't have my materials. I can't do it. No, sweetie, it's right here. No excuses. It's right here. It can be a PDF. It can be a link from another website, but whatever they needed, I put it right there so that there's no excuse, because I know my kids and I wanted to eliminate that. Plus, I wanted to make it easy for them. You don't want them looking over here and looking over there for everything. So just make it simple. The great thing about Google Classroom is that you can also connect it to your Google Docs. So if you happen to have had this information on your Google Docs, you can just share it from there. So whatever works for you, you can tailor it to do whatever you need it to do. Then also you can see here, I had mine separated by novels. So you see I had some assignments from Hatchet, I had some from If Stones Could Speak. So again, you can just organize in any way that works for you. And so once you assign it, you give them a date of when it's due. And then once they turn it in, it shows. You give them their, grade or response or whatever you want to do, and you can keep going from there. And so again, that's just what worked for me. Okay, next. So here's something I wanted to say, that we have to create an atmosphere for student self-motivation. Self-motivation is more important than ever before, because we're no longer in the classroom with them. When they get off task, you can kind of stand by them, in proximity. You know how they taught us, stand by them, give them eye contact, say, oh, you could, I know you could do a little bit better, give me a little bit more. We're not able to do any of that. Now, these kids are basically depending on their own self-motivation, which is good, because in life, you have to be self-motivated if you want to achieve anything. And so when you set up this classroom, set it up with self-motivation in mind. Find ways to encourage them to do the work. And so, of course, they might say, I can't do it, but get them to change and say, I want to do it. The only reason they're going to want to do it is if you give them a reason to want to do it. You know what I mean? Make it exciting for them, make it fun. And then when they start asking questions, well, how do I do it? Well, answer it, show them how to do it. And then when they say, I'll try to do it, give them thumbs up, give them encouragement. And then when they realize I can do it, I will do it, then you made it. That's what you want. It's all about you. You can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make them drink. But if we can get them excited, get them excited about coming towards the water. And once they get there, realize how good it is. That's what it's all about. And that's what we do. So look for opportunities to create generational impact. I love this statement, because now, again, you're no longer in a classroom with just your little group of kids that you have influence over. Anybody within the sound of your voice, you now have influence over. That is powerful. That means you're not just teaching your student, you're teaching their grandma, their grandpa, anybody that's listening. So now you have the opportunity to be everybody's favorite teacher. You know what I mean? So, and change thoughts. Some people have negative experiences with teachers, negative experiences with education. You have a chance to change that for the good. So use this opportunity to do that. So keep that in mind as you're talking to students and correcting them and encouraging them. It's not just them that's listening, everybody's listening. Okay. So here are some things that you should consider when you're doing virtual teaching. So consider doing a welcome video for your students. My principal had us to do that. And at first I thought, why am I doing this? But then I realized after I did it, it's really a great thing. It was just a quick little 1-minute video that said, hey, you know, welcome to my class. This is how we're going to be interacting. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. You know, I can't wait for us to learn and go on this journey. You know, let me know what you're thinking, you know, and I'll see you soon. Just something really short and sweet to get them encouraged. Like, oh my God, she's waiting for me. Or he's waiting for me. My teacher's looking forward to hearing from me. You know, encourage them through that video. It's a great tool to welcome them to your classroom. And then make your Google Classroom user-friendly. Make it user-friendly for you, for your students, for their caregivers, anybody that may be using it. Just keep it simple. You know what I mean? Don't do too much. Just keep it simple. And so third, consider the fact, like I said, that you will be teaching more than just your student, i.e. grandma, grandpa, sisters, brothers, mom, and dad. So if they have a question, you know, consider that. Make time for that. Don't just dismiss it because they're not your student. Either, you know, you can address it then or just say, well, you know what, at the end of the session, you know, if you guys have any questions, I'll deal with it. Just, you know, or I'll make sure I address that for you. But because they want to be included too. So I'm not telling you to adjust your whole lesson, but just be aware that they're listening and they may have questions and we don't want to just throw them away too. So know your students, know their abilities, know what you can give them. Don't give them too much and then set them up for failure. Again, we're trying to increase their desire to want to learn. So just give it to them in ways that they can handle. And then know yourself. If you're not the technology guru, admit that. Get with somebody who is. Watch some videos, go to some trainings, do whatever you have to do to make sure that you can be the best teacher you can be for your students. Because, you know, your kids are dependent on you. All right, so I think I'm at the end of mine. All right, so this is what I will say. One thing that we as teachers do well is handle change. We change curriculums, we change rooms, we change grades. That's what we do. And so this is no different. Yes, it's a tremendous change that's going on in the whole world. But one thing that we can do is be the constant that our kids need and manage that change in a way that helps them succeed. And I know we can do it, Louisiana. Let's get it done. And that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kelly. As I told you, I'm blessed to work with some amazing educators who I would put up against any in the state or the country. So thank you, Ms. Kelly and Ms. Manring. I think, and before I go into this continuous learning plan, I think it's real important for all of us that are district leaders or school leaders to remember that what drives everything in education are our teachers. And putting and supporting them, giving them the tools they need, making sure that, like Erica was saying about her students, she didn't want to, you know, she took away all excuses so that her students could engage in the activities that they needed to. One thing that I know Rochelle and I tried hard to do from the district level is to provide everything that's needed so that there's no excuses for our teachers so that they can focus on meeting the needs of the students. So, and that's how we roll here in Monroe City Schools. So I just want to thank them because they're doing the hard work of the contact with the kids, and it's so meaningful and so very important. And our job is to support them in that. So in looking forward to next year, because just like you guys, in whichever district you were in, you serve in and serve the students in that area. This past spring came on quick. We all had to respond quickly. And I think in Monroe City Schools, I am very proud of what we did. We did the best we could given the circumstances. Looking forward, we're like every district. We have plans A, B, C, D, E, F. I mean, it's and it's constantly fluid. In fact, we had a set of plans, and then at the end of yesterday afternoon, I learned that we're going to have to adjust even those. And so, but what we have adopted at this point is that we will have a continuous learning experience for our students. That being said, no matter whether they're in the school building or at home or in one room with, you know, and they're having to take some classes virtually, there are all kinds of different options, but academic instruction must remain constant. That means that the materials, the methods, the digital platforms must be seamless, and they must have all the supports that they would normally receive. So we have decided, you know, that we are making the purchases now for all the student materials that are needed, making sure, because we had some Chromebooks that aged out, so we're having to replace those. We were one-to-one with our K-2 schools, but they were using iPads and they won't really serve the purpose, and they're very old anyway, so we're having to replace those. So we're having to invest in some technology. We're also having to invest in materials that the kids will actually take with them, and we're having to make sure that teachers have what they need to teach, no matter where they may be. So some things that you will want if you're a district person, some things that you're a school level person, some things that you will want to keep in mind and establish from the get-go. First of all is your communication plan. That is the most important thing if during this time when things might change. Have a clear communication plan, first of all, between you and your staff, and then with your parents and students. Again, the adoption and the purchase of the Remind, to me, it was a no-brainer. Y'all might not know, but I also serve as federal programs director, but when they said, hey, we need this, it was a no-brainer to me that was something that we invested in at the beginning of the school year so that we could have constant communication with our parents. Little did I had no idea that COVID-19 was coming and how much we would use it as we went forward. So having some sort of plan, no matter what it is as to how to communicate. Then making sure you have the materials, the equipment. And I know we're all, especially those of you in rural areas struggling with this connectivity. I understand the issues behind that. It's a sidebar conversation, but if students need connection, we're gonna have to figure out how to do it. And we're fortunate, we're in the city, so we can provide them something. Those of you who are in rural areas, I'm hoping that they do get that opened up for you guys. One thing I would say is establish some common district platforms. For us, it's Google Classroom, and that includes Google Meet, and we're going to also be using Google Meet some, but that also includes Zoom, because Zoom has some features that Google Meet doesn't have. Zoom allows you to do breakout groups and some different annotation things that you can't do in Google Meet. And so, you know, either of those are fine. We really don't care, but we're really not going to vary from those basic things. Keeping it simple. Also, the adoption of a common digital platform for like Google Classroom, because I think that something that all of us need to go ahead and accept is that even if we're back in schools, we're going to have students who are absent, either because they are sick or someone in their household is sick and they cannot report to school at that time. So they need the ability to maintain their academic work during that time. And so it's going to be a requirement in Monroe City Schools, every teacher, and yes, from kindergarten down, and yes, they can do it, will have a Google Classroom, and they will post those assignments so that, you know, a student isn't gone and doesn't have to wait 3 days before you can pick up your work. They will be able to keep up with their work as they go. Something that I have seen, this next one, instructional methods that support the full circle of full learning circle. Something that I have seen as an educational leader that I'm honestly fearful of in education, in this virtual education, is the idea that presentation of information is teaching. Because I think that all of you as educators know that that is actually a very, very small part of what teaching is. Teaching is so much more. It is monitoring that student work. Now in the classroom, how do we do that? Well, we walk around and we look over their shoulder and we see if they completed that problem or if they've started their essay. Virtually, it's much harder. And so we have to think of ways to monitor and give feedback virtually, because teaching cannot just be presentation of information. It must involve the whole class discussion of feedback, group discussions, independent work, yes, individual feedback, as Ms. Kelly so beautifully showed, individual coaching even, and then of course our assessment and progress monitoring. But those are just pieces. It's that coaching and that discussion that happens in the middle between the direct instruction, the presentation of the information, and the assessment, that we need to make sure that we are figuring out how to engage students during that time. Yes, it is more challenging. Yes, you have to think outside the box, but there are ways, and I thought Tori did a great job of showing how she engaged her students through her Zoom sessions this past spring. So that's just something I want to challenge all of you to think about, is that we cannot fall into the pit of thinking that as long as we provide these video lessons that we're teaching. And I think that because you and I know that teaching is much bigger than that, and there's a much bigger cycle, and it's a much more involved than that, much more of an art form. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Rochelle Williams to talk about the special education.
For special education, we are continuing to get training. The first thing we must realize is that our students are our students. They're everyone's students. They're not this regular ed teacher student. They're not the special ed teacher student. They are ours, and our job, our responsibility is to educate every student that's in our district. And we're going to do that by any means possible. And we learned that on March 13th. We went from TV stations to our YouTube channel, to Zoom, all kinds of media. And so we are in the business of treating every student as our own. So for the special education aspect, we're going to continue to do training. We're going to continue to do collaborations with regular ed teachers. And with that said, we also have to remember that special ed has many, many, many federal laws that we have to look at as far as privacy and confidentiality. So we're going to continue, and we're going to share with you. If you have any questions, we're willing to share. And if I'm not going to say we know the answers, because we don't. We're all in this together, but we'll try to work forward with you to do the best that we can do for not only the students of Monroe City Schools, but the students of the state of Louisiana, because that's our business, students. I'm going to pass it on. I think our time is running short.
It is. So now I'm actually going to turn it over to Holly to talk about the materials.
Hi everyone, my name is Holly Jesse and I'm the supervisor of ELA for grades 3 through 12 at the Louisiana Department of Education. I am so thankful to my friends from Monroe City Schools and the Writing Revolution. I knew that there would not be a better group of people to share this information with you, and it looks like from the chat you all agree. Just to get to a few logistics, I saw a few things come across in the chat talking about text access. And early on, I think Monroe City Schools mentioned it briefly, but having individual access to the required unit novels and unit readers so that kids would have access to the text at home is essential. We partnered with American Reading Company, and houses that are needed to support distance learning are flagged with little orange houses. So the link on that slide will bring you to their portal. If you have not yet secured copies of the text for students, please reach out to American Reading Company as soon as possible so that they can help you get the materials you need for next year. In addition to the novels, you also need to contact Xanadu to have a copy of the unit readers to make sure that all the supplemental text are provided to students as well. Go ahead to the next slide. As far as materials for implementing distance learning, you're going to need access to the teaching slides. You saw how Miss Kelly and Miss Manring made some great adaptations to fit their digital platforms, but you're still going to need access to that content. And the student materials handout, again, as you like transition into Google Classroom or Nearpod or Pear Deck, as we've seen some teachers doing, you just need the actual access to those materials to make them usable for whatever high-tech platform you are using. Next slide. Learning logs, they can be a hard document, but if you're in a high-tech environment, it really just makes sense to have a shared Google file that teachers and students can go back and forth with. And extended learning, we added independent read novels to every grade, to every unit in grades 3 through 8 to provide some flexibility options for our students. They're aligned to the topics and themes. Next slide. All of the information that I've shared with you related to ELA guidebooks is shared on the Strong Start Guide. It is linked on this slide and we update it often. In fact, if you have visited recently, you've noticed that we've provided some options. There is no like singular digital text access solution, but if districts are interested in pursuing that with a few different vendors, if they have one-to-one technology, there's a list of available titles and all of that can be found on page 2 of the document. And we've also added some samples of the low-tech distance learning companion documents to the final page of that document as well. I know that we just have a few minutes left. You can go ahead and click forward. And here's all of our contact information. If you have questions about ELA guidebooks, you can reach out to us at elaguidebooks@la.gov, communications at the Writing Revolution, or Serena Wright at monroecityschools.net. If you can go ahead and stop sharing, Serena. As related to materials, I just wanted to take this moment while I have so many of you in the room together to share the latest component that we have added to guidebooks. So if you have not been to Louisiana Curriculum Hub, and I'm going to throw out the website address in the chat so that you have it. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. This is the platform that we launched. Can everybody see Curriculum Hub? To house our 9-12 curriculum, if you have not checked it out, the digital units for our new ELA high school guidebook units are available if you click grades 9 through 12. Down here, it tells you that we've just added access to 3 through 8 tools for the 2018 units. So you no longer have to download the zip files, but I'm going to walk you through the process of how you would access these materials. So if I am a 5th grade teacher, it would look like this for you because you have to authorize and log in. Those words are pretty scary. However, it's really just allowing this program, this website, to provide the digital copies of these files. So the most important thing to do first is make sure that you have a folder in your Google Drive. If you do not have a folder, the program will not be able to write because it cannot create a folder on your drive. However, it can add the documents to a folder on your drive. So if I wanted to download the materials for Making of a Scientist, I select my Google account. I provide permission. This button right here is a preview. It allows you to open and see all the contents of the files in a view-only manner. However, what you really want to do is download the files so that you have your own editable copy downloaded and saved to your drive, which will make conversion to your Google Classroom much easier because it's already available in Google Slides and Google Files. So you'll see that it's telling you it's loading a list of files to copy. This is it's not an extremely long process, but it might not last until the end of our session, because I know we are totally short on time. However, we did do this in session L082, I believe. So if you can catch that recording, we did reveal this as well if we'd run out of time for all these steps. And you can see that as the file is copying in my Google Drive, the folders are going to start to appear and filling themselves. In these updates, in the unit folder, we will have the Get Started materials, so you no longer have to navigate to the Get Started page that have all of our approach guides and instructional strategies. And then in the section folder, we've made accessing the materials a little bit easier. Instead of having that additional materials and slides, all of the materials are in one place, so you can look, grab all of the materials for lesson 1 and upload them to your digital platform. And that is it. We are right at time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to chat in the box. And thank you for your time. And again, thank you to Monroe City Schools and the Writing Revolution for sharing all of the ways that they have been successful.
And Holly, oh, you're off of there now. But anyone who's still on, if you have questions for any of our teachers or Rochelle, they provided my email address, but I'm happy to forward those on. So I know that I saw a lot of questions for Tori and Erica. I'd be glad to forward those on to them. So I work with some amazing people, very blessed. So thank you all for joining us today.
You're pretty amazing too, Serena.
I see a question about librarians. If someone wants to-
Sure. I know that a lot of them, of course, I can read stories. They expose the children to other literature and nonfiction texts. Do y'all know, Rochelle, do you know of anything else that happened during those sessions?
Some worked on type of comprehension activities and different things like that during the session as well. So.
And if any of you would like to, I mean, I know of a few of the librarians who had some good success with those. We could forward, if you've got librarians who want to connect with other librarians about what to do during those, what they did during those sessions, we'd be glad to do that.
I think it was a question, and Zoom, they were required to do Zoom sessions, one of them.
Yeah.
And then I see Holly answered the question. A lot of people were asking about accessing Google. She answered your question in the chat bar for anyone who's still on.
What was the question?
For districts that don't use Google,
Oh, okay.
they could access that curriculum. But Holly answered it. I was just letting people know.
The zip files will just be in PowerPoint and Word format instead of Google. But many teachers were trying to transition them themselves because Google was a little bit more compatible.
Yeah, compatible and user-friendly and transferable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anyone else have any questions they want us to answer while we're on?
Thank you to everybody that participated today. Presenters, great job. This was very informative. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end this session.
Okay.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys.